This is Gemara Pesachim Daf Mem Vav. All the learning for the month of Tevi. Says in Sanskrit as a special Chosi l'neshama f'lei Rasha b'asevari leib, as well as the Chosi l'neshama f'ari leib in Yaakov, the neshama shev Aliyah, and the Chosi the entire Chabura should as Chosi l'neshmasam. Of course, our Chilim Shem Mishusem have refuah shlema bekarev Chaim Pichos ben Malki Namir ben Akir Men ben Vin Chaim Estar of Zivri Ezel Sarbas Knendel Itavasian Machlai Zoyes Chaim Sarasi Yosel Memindol as the president Shavalei Shemas ben Avim Shavik Shivir Chanav Aldovini Teriva Shal ben Tihila Daniel ben Chan Rizal Yuda Aryeh ben Liba Bracha Bas Tavia Musa Mechil Yisrael Nathalia Huva B'Sar Shar Choli Yisrael. We pick it up on the bottom of Memhamid Bees, not all the way on the bottom, about 12, 13 lines on the bottom. First word on the line is Lifnim Zemizeh Teku. Says the Gemara Taner Rabbanan, beginning the new sugya. We started this yesterday very quickly. Says the Gemara Hapaz She'if Shalom Nif Shalom Echel Adam. We have bread that is moldy bread. Well, I don't know if this is the fourth, the fifth occurrence of our moldy bread in the Masechta. And people cannot eat it, it's that moldy. However, but a dog can still eat it. We've already seen that there's always two levels. Level number one is could a human eat it? Level number two is could a dog eat it? So this level is human, no. Dog, yes. What's the halacha? Mitama tumas eichlin. It still is considered food. That it could be mitame tumas eichlin b'kabeya the shir v'beya v'nisrefes imatamea, but it's allowed to be burnt with something that is tamei b'pesach. Mishum Rav Nosson Aimer. That's the Tanakama. Comes like Rav Nosson and he says in a mitama. No, it is not. It is no longer mitama tumas eichlin. As soon as a Jew can no longer eat it, even though at this point the dogs could still eat it. Still says Rav Nosson, it's no longer mitame. Says the Gemara, okay. So come on, who does the following Mishnah go like? Klal Amru b'Tairis. He said a rule about all Tairis. Kol hami yochel lo eichel adam. Anything which is specified and set aside for human consumption, tame, it is tame. Ad she bas v'echel kalif. It is able to give off tama until a dog can no longer eat it. It is possible from a dog till eating it. Come on. So like Rav Nosson, obviously he's going with the Tanakama. Like we said, that a human cannot eat it, but a dog could eat it, then it will still give off Tama. Says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan, 7 lines on the bottom. Arivas ha'avdin. Arivas, that was the trough that we've been discussing yesterday. Ha'avadin, of the tanners. Shenas l'teichei kemach. So you have this big trough that they use to tan leather in it, and at the moment there's no leather in it, but you put flour in it before Pesach. What's the halacha? Toish l'shim yoim chayiv levayer. If it's within 3 days of Pesach, you gotta get rid of the flour. Koidim shleishim yoim ein chayiv levayer. If it's 3 days prior, you do not have to get rid of that flour. That's only if there's no actual hides currently being tanned inside this trough. But if you put in the hide, then even within 3 days, you don't have to be fired. Why not? Because there's a hide in it. That is disgusting. That is leather. Not disgusting, just you can't eat it. And therefore, you don't have to be fired because it's no longer considered food. Even for 1 day, even for 1 moment, at the end of the day, if there are hides in it, it's no longer human food, and therefore we don't have to be worried as Pesach begins. Says the Gemara, this was the end of the Mishnah. Yesterday we discussed extensively that we have this trough, we have dough that's getting stuck in the trough, it's in the bottom, it's on the side. Do you want it there? Do you not want it there? Didn't make a difference. What was the difference that made yesterday? Is it a kazayis or is it not a kazayis? We had two lashinis yesterday. We had two lashinis discussing, is it a kazayis or not? Where in the trough was it? Is it on the floor? Is it on the side? Great. Then the Mishnah concluded, and the Mishnah said, v'chein, and similarly, with regard to tires, that what? That if you're makbid, it's a chazitza. If you want it, then it's like the areva, then it's bottled to the item. So what's the obvious question? Me dummy. What's the comparison? V'chein usually means it's the same case. Says the Gemara, me dummy, is it comparable? Some b'shiyura talya milsa. In the first part of the Mishnah, yesterday's daf memei, all do with the shear. Is it a kazais? Is it not a kazais? Chovir b'tayrus b'kabei the talya milsa. Seemingly is telling you whether it is whether you want it there or not. So we're going to have 3 potential answers how to answer up this v'chein in the Mishnah. First, we begin by Amar Rav Yehuda. Before we get into the first answer, says Rav Yehuda, 1 attempt. Ema, switch the words of the Mishnah. Li'inyan atoma einoi kain. Not v'chein li'inyan toma, but the exact opposite. With regard to toma einoi kain, it's exact opposite. Then Amar Abai says Abai, that you can't say v'chein li'inyan toma katani. It says v'chein. We always find there's different ways you can amend the Mishnah. You can make minor changes. changes, but to say something that says v'chein and so means and it's not, that's too extreme. Says the Gemara, no way, says Abaya. Elamar Abaya, terrace number 1 of the Mishnah. Hachi kamar v'chein, this is what the Mishnah means v'chein, moving along to Menvavim and Aleph, v'chein le'inyin siraf tumah, with regard to combining for the requisite share of Tumah Pesach, well, that's the din of Pesach. Ubeshari Ma'isa Shana Ika Pelukta is going to be a machlekes. So the way the Rashi learns the sugya is we know that there's a minimum shear for food in order to either become Tameh or give off Tumah, and that's really the machlekes Rishonim over here. Rashi learns that the entire sugya has to do with giving off Tumah. Rashi learns that the shear to give off Tumah is a shear kebeya. Only when an item is a kebeya will be able to give off and be mitameh something else. Other Rishonim here learn with regard to the item itself has to be a kebeya in order to accept the Tumah. Rashi says no, as the top Rashi here points out, that the item, even when it's less than a kabeya, will become tamei, but to give off tameh will only be with a kabeya. So that's a din by Pesach. What does that mean? Let's see the Gemara. The Gemara explains, and again, this is going to be the v'chein in the Mishnah. V'chein in the end of the Mishnah said that the similar din with regard to the dough stuck in the trough is the same and similar din with regard to tameh. Let's see what that means. He says the Gemara. Kigon, for example, dikapachas mikabeya oichlin. There's less than a beya of oichlin. V'nagu b'hai batzik. And it touches into this piece of dough. This piece of dough, which is lodged into the wall, into the floor of our trough, like we spoke about in the first Mishnah. And now we have a food item which is less than a beya that touches that dough. So what's the question? Does the food item and that piece of dough combine to the requisite shear? If they combine to the requisite shear, then it could give off tumah, because then it's a beya. If they do not combine, then what do you have? You have a half a beya and a half a beya. It doesn't make something else tameh. Says the Gemara, Pesach, when it comes to Pesach, the Yisuroi Chashiv, where the Isur is Chashiv, Mitzarif. You can't deny that there's this piece of dough in the wall. Therefore, it's going to be Mitzarif in order to equal this shear. B'shari Ma'isashana, that's what? That's the Seif of the Mishnah. Excuse me, Kabeda Talia Milsa. Shari Ma'isashana has to do with Kabeda. Shari Ma'isashana has to do you want it there? If you don't want it there, then mitzarif. Then that piece of dough sitting in the wall as if it just stuck out, and therefore will be mitzarif. But if you actually want that piece of dough there, you want it to be in the crack, then of course, what do we know? Then areu kareva, then it gets the din and the status of the trough itself. Then it will not combine in order to equal the requisite shear. So the first answer, says the Gemara, the v'chein at the end of the Mishnah is with regard to the case that we're dealing with, the same case that we have this piece of dough stuck in the wall. Says the Gemara right now, what does that mean? That means with regard to equaling the requisite shear of Tumah, the din will be that if it's Pesach, then it will combine, because the Isser is Chashiv. Whether it's the rest of the year, it's going to be depend upon whether you are makbid and you want it there or not. If you want it there, then it will not combine, because then it's like the wall of the trough. If you don't want it there, it will combine. Maskiv Larava, so that was terrace number 1. Maskiv Larava, Rav is not so happy. 8 lines down. Mikatani Mitzarif doesn't say in the Mishnah that it will be Mitzarif. That's not what the Mishnah said. What did the Seif of the Mishnah say? For Chayitzitz Katani. The Seif of the Mishnah said whether you want it there or not will determine whether it is a Chatzitza, an interposition, it blocks the wall. What does that have to do with combining? That's not the Pshat. Elamar Rav Pshat number 2. Which I'm sure many, when they learn the Pasha words of the Mishnah, they assume that this is talking about that if you want to dump this big trough into the mikvah, and you want the mikvah water to go all over the trough, that is what the end of the Mishnah is talking about. Now let's let the Gemara explain again. Hey Chidami, what's the case? Going to itma hachareva. This areva, this trough became tamei. Ubaylat mulei. And you want to dunk the whole trough into the mik. So what's the halacha? Pesach, the Yisura Chashiv. On Pesach, you have this little piece of dough stuck into the wall. That's Chashiv. Chaitis. That's going to be a chatzitza. And therefore, what? Is that kli? Is that utensil? Is that trough? As if it went into the mikvah? No way. V'lo yisagale tefillah is not going to work. It's like a tefillah, you got a big bandit on the wall. Therefore, it's not going to work. The rest of the year, if you want it and if you care about it being there, but if you want it there, meaning you want it to be part of the kli, it's like the wall of the kli. That's like a case, just to give a bit of a mashal. It's like when you have a bandage and you want the bandage to be there and you're never going to take off that bandage and it's going to be there for a week, a month, a year, whatever it is, then it's not a chatzitza. It's considered part of your skin. So do over here, when you have this piece of dough and it's stuck into the wall, you want it to be part of the dough. It's not a chatzitza, it's part of the wall, and therefore the tefillah will be good. So it says that Barava's teretz number 2, that when the Mishnah ended off, it's with regard to chatzitza when you want to dunk this trough into the still no good. The Mishnah doesn't say with regard to Taira the positive that you're dunking the trough into the mikvah. The exact opposite. It doesn't say with regard to Taira, it says with regard to Tama. Final teretz number 3. Can this trough become Dame? What's the case? It's Marco the Naga Sharetz by Bats. You got this trough, you got this piece of dough stuck into the wall. A sharetz comes along and touches that piece of dough. Now, is the entire trough tamei? Pesach leads to a chashiv that piece of dough is chashiv. And therefore, what? It's going to block. It's chatzitza, so it's a blocker. It doesn't let the toma, doesn't let the sharetz penetrate and touch the wall. Therefore, the trough will not be tamei. The rest of the year is telling kabeda. If you're makbid chaytis, then it'll be chatzitza. It's a piece of dough blocking the wall. Right to be will be part of the wall, and therefore will not be chatzitza. 3 different pshatim. In pshat number 1 with Tzira, if we don't like that one. Pshat number 2 was going to the mikvah, we don't like that one. Pshat number 3, Rav Papa, which is what we stick with, is with regard to Tama, with regard to the item becoming Tami, as Sheretz touching the dough, whether the dough will block the Tama or not. Says the Mishnah as we continue, Memvav Aleph, back in the middle of them. But Seik HaCheiri, that piece of dough, Mishki Yotzei B'Y Shehechmetz, if you have something similar to it, I know I didn't explain what def is, we'll see in 1 second. But if you have something similar with it that became Chametz, Ariza Aser, it is Aser. What's this def? Those Rashi explains, She'ein Nikar in Ichmetz. Def, it doesn't recognize, it doesn't hear, you're not sure if it became Chametz in Lav Shemish Shona, who Kecherish, it's different like a Cherish, Azesh, Ishlai, Aznaim, it has ears, Vein and Nikar, Shemei Alav, you don't know if it hears or not. Teina Demaimid, I'll be Ruv, I'll die to one shot. Pshat number 2 says Rashi, this is Achrina about the Cherish. Kosh like a Cherish is difficult like a Cherish, Vein and Nikar, but then you're not sure. Did it become Chametz? So it's a Lemech, Siva Bonavin. So like we saw before, so we have this piece of dough, and the point of the story is we're calling it a deaf piece of dough, but the detail that we need to know is you're not sure if it is Chametz. So says the Mishnah, what's the din? That if you have a similar piece of dough with a similar time frame, and that piece of dough became chametz, now you can know this piece of dough became chametz. Says the Gemara, it's such an important Gemara. What if you don't have a similar piece of dough? Now what? You have this def dough, you have this dough, it's hard, you have this dough, you're not sure, you don't know if it's chametz. And so the first way to figure it out is you made a similar dough. If you made a similar dough and that other dough is already chametz, you consume this one. What if you didn't? How do you know? The amount of time it takes to work for the tower of Nunya to Tveria, which is a mill. That is the amount of time for something to come chametz. Let's always remember this 46 blood of Pesachim. That's what we learned the shear of a mill, 18 minutes. The name of mill, says Gemara, why tell me an interesting case to walk from here to there to tell me it's a mill? The shear of the mill can make that the amount of time to walk a mill is from the tower of Ninia until Tveria. Once we're on the time of measurements, once we're talking about 1 mill, Pesach is Baruch 1 mill. Sorry, it is 1 mill. It's approximately 18 minutes. Says the Gemara, Amar Avu, Amar Shimon Lakish, 3 other halachas that are similar, that they are based on the amount of time that it takes to walk 4 mill. What is that, like Gabel? That if someone gives you a dough to knead, but he gives you kelim which are tamei, and he says to you to please make it b'tayra. How can you make it b'tayra if he gave you tamei kelim? Says the Gemara, if there is tar kelim that you could go and get within 4 mill, you got to go get those 4 kelim. Litzvila, says Rashi, such an important Rashi, quoted by Ramesh in the Tshuva and Beis, Chavzayin, I believe in our Chaim. With regard to davening in a minyan, says Rashi, let's feel if there's a minyan within 4 mil, you got to go to the minyan. You got to wash your hands are tummy, your hands are dirty. You woke up in the morning. What do? You got to find water. Or actually, better, probably netilas yadayim. Rashi says it means what? Not for tum in the morning, but rather to eat bread. If you have bread within 4 mil in front of you, as the Gemara was about to say, you got to go get it. Just if anyone has difficulty with math, 4 mil, 4 times 18 is about 72 minutes in front of you. Amar Nachman bar Yitzchak Evu Amra. Number 1 says Nachman bar Yitzchak, you got it all wrong. Evu was one that said this din. Number 2, Varba, he said 4 things, not just 3 Amar. But what was the 4th? Ibod, with regard to tanning, it's not The kulan she'ibdan oshilach bahem. All these leathers, all these skins and hides. If you tan them, or if you worked with them, you walked with them. They avudan. The amount of work the hiring is going to be tar. Meaning, if you worked with the dough for those hides for 18 minutes, it's no longer going to be called hide. At that point, it's going to. No longer to be called food. Again, it's the flesh of an animal. So is this called food or is this called hide? If it's called hide, it's not a kabel tama. If it's called food, then not. Says the Gemara. The kulan she'ibdan, or if you work with them, kidei avodah tahirin, it will be tar chutz me'ar adam, except for the hides or the skin of a person. V'kama kidei avuda, amar Rav Yinu, amar Rav Yanai, tehilach arba milin. Amar Rav Yisrael Chanina, don't make a mistake. Loishanu el lefanav. When was this din of 4 mil? That was in front of you. Loishanu el lefanav, aval achrav. But behind you, afilu milin chayzer. Don't go back even a mil. And amar Rav Acham, mina mil. Who de'enoi chayzer? You don't have to go back for a mil. Which is the halach lemaisa, that any time one has to worry if there's a minion, it's 4 mil, 72 minutes in front of you on the road, or if you're going to have to make a detour, you're going to have to go backward, it has to be less than 18 minutes. Similarly for the Netilas Yadayim, which is one of the reasons why it's not a myth that you don't have to touch the bread, but the truth is, someone's in a car, you got to ask your question, is there a rest stop within 72 minutes? Usually the answer is yes, and therefore you have to wash your hands before you eat the bread. Similarly, with the din of ligabel to go get the tahar kalim, says the Mishnah on the bottom of Mevavim Health. Big sugyas today. Kids mafresh and challah b'toma. How can you be mafresh challah b'toma? You have dough. You're baking dough in Pesach. You want to make some fresh matzahs. Of course, it's perfectly allowed to bake in Yantif. But the problem is the dough is tummy. So what's the problem? The problem is that you're gonna have to be mafresh the challah, give it to the kohen. What's the problem? You, the Yisrael, you can eat your matzah when it's tummy, but could the kohen eat his challah when it's tummy? Of course not. So how are you giving him dough in Yantif if he's not gonna be able to eat it? Says the Gemara. Better yet, says the Mishnah. No, you do. Don't make it into challah until you bake it. Bake all the dough, then take off a piece and give it to the kohen. What do you gain? You gain that if you were to give the kohen the bread, the dough, the kohen can't bake it. It's going to become chametz. To give him actually something that's baked, therefore it's not going to be a problem. Throw it into cold water to prevent the process from turning into chametz. Amar Rav Yeshua, says Rav Yeshua, chametz observe love this is not the chametz you have to be careful about. You don't have to worry about it at all. Says Yeshua, leave it there, let it stay the dough there. If it turns chametz, we don't care. Pashas, the reason is because once it has to go to the kohen, it's no longer yours. Once you separate it, it's not yours, it's the kohen. Therefore, you don't have to be concerned with it. 3 different opinions what you're going to do with this dough. Just one word on the first opinion said, what do you do? First bake it and then take off the challah. This is a big maramakum, and this actually is very big halach l'maisa. One should never forget, but if one forgets to take of challah, then what do? You have all your challah sitting here, you didn't take of challah. You know what you do? Gather them all together, take off one piece. Challah works even after it is baked. L'chachila, of course, we do it beforehand. In this case, the Mishnah, we have no choice. We can't do it before. We're afraid of it turning into chametz. That's why we do it prior. Says the Gemara. What is the machlekes in the Mishnah? The machlekes in the Mishnah is the din of Tavis Hana. Again, Rav Elazar said, don't take off challah until you bake it. Rav Yeshua said what? Rav Yeshua said, you don't have to worry about it. Says the Gemara, Rav Elazar, so what is the old with Tavis Hana? Mamain. The choice of giving it to the kohen, that's mammon, that's a real thing. And therefore, you have a bailus in it. And therefore, if you take off a piece of challah and you don't give it to the kohen, you're over, because it's your piece of dough, it's your mammon. Rav Yeshua said, no, Tavis Hana ain't mammon, it's not mammon at all. And therefore, it says Rav Yeshua, you don't have to be concerned with this, take off the challah, leave it on the side. What? It's going to become chametz in the middle of Pesach. Who cares? It's not yours. Says the Gemara, no, that's not the machlek. The famous rule of Hayel. To Rav Eliezer, Hayel. We say Hayel. Therefore, says Rav Eliezer, we have to be careful. Therefore, you cannot think of the challah until you bake it. Unless you want to be shayel on it, you want to undo your process of making challah, you can do that. And therefore, it's considered your money. Therefore, you can't separate it. This is also a tremendous line. If let's say someone forgets, someone takes off challah and all the challah gets mixed together, and then you bake it. What are you going to do now? All your challah is mixed together. Every one of your challahs is a piece of that separate challah. Everything is asr. No, you do. You're shayil. You undo the challah. You go to Talmud Chacham. He gets together 3 people. They say mutulach, 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 and now it's as if it's undone, just like a daras nadarim. You're shayil. You ask and you remove the sanctity that you put on that challah, and then you could subsequently go and separate it. It says the Gemara over here of Lezer holds. We say hayil, and since theoretically, even after you separated the challah, chala. You could go and undo it. Therefore, says Rabbi Eliezer, it's called mum and it's called yours. Therefore, don't do it. First bake it and then give it to the kohen. Rabbi Yeshua, he argues, we don't say hayel. Therefore, Yeshua is not bothered. You could separate it even before you give it to the kohen. Even before you bake it, and give it, and you don't have to have any issue, even if it's going to turn into chametz. Says the Gemara, Itmar, Hoife, Miyantav l'chol. If you bake from Miyantav to the weekday of Chesed like Yamal, because Rabbi Amrina like we don't say if guests would have come, then Chazile would be fit for them. What are you doing? It's Yantif. What are you busy baking for during the week? Says Rav Chesed, you get Malchus. You were not allowed to bake on that moment. You were not allowed to break bread for after Yantif. Rabbi Amar, no way. You never know. You never know. You make an extra batch of dough. Maybe someone's going to show up in 5 minutes, and you're going to give him that dough. And Yantiv says, Rabbi, we say Hoyel, therefore it's not a concern. Now we're about to segue into Eirif Tavshilei. And Amalei Rabbi Rav Chisda. L'didach Amalei Min Hoyel. According to Rav Chisda, we don't say Hoyel, and that's the reason why you get Malchus. If you baked on Yantiv or after Yantiv for Chol, Hoyel Veheich. As the Rabbi of Chisda, 1 second. If you don't believe in this concept of the Hayel, so how are you baking on Yom for Shabbos? Amar Leis, Rav Chisda responds a very important teretz. You make an Erev Tavshilin. Says Rabbi, 1 second. How is that possible? Erev Tavshilin is a din derabanan. How could it undo and allow din deraisa? Amar Leis responds. Midaraisa, Sarchei Shabbos Nasim Yantif. Says Rav Chisda, an important aside. Midaraisa, you're allowed to cook from Shabbos Yantif. Says Rashi, why? Because Kula Chada Kedushahi. It's really the same level of saying today you could cook from one to the other. It's a din Rabbanan. Rabbanan to Gaz Rabbi Gzeir Shem Yom Roifin Yantif Af L'Chol. The Rabbanan were worried you might come to cook the Chol. They came to Schur Rabbanan Yiftav Shilin. Islay Akira says Rav Chisda, that's not a problem. Says Rav Chisda, on a Midaraisa level, you're allowed to cook. The whole forbiddance of cooking from Shav Yontif to Shabbos is din derabanan. Erev Tavshilin takes care of that din. Eisvei says Gemara behema masukanes lo yishcha yishnai shachtit el kadesh yachol lechle menu kazayis sli mebod yom. Unless you eat a kazayis of sli of roasted meat during the day, yachol yat lechol. You would have thought that you could think that you could eat even though you don't want to eat. Says the Gemara. Says the Rabbi, I hold of Hoyel. So this is great. The whole concept that you can check because maybe you'll eat, that's the concept of Hoyel, that perhaps you're going to eat. Hoyel. Since if I wanted to eat, I could eat. But therefore I can check the animal. That we don't say, why are you shechting the animal? Because if it has in money. But you don't need to the rice. So what's going on over here? You can't be making this to the rice for Hefsin Mammon Amalei in Misham Hefsin Mammon. What's the? It's a different mechanics. Because you're going to lose the money you decide you're going to eat. And therefore you want to eat. Therefore you could do it. Therefore says Rav Chisda, I don't hold the oil, but it's not a problem. Rabbi, you hold the oil, all's good and dandy. That is a big decided, big difference in the rules of Erev Tavshilin. The Rav Chisda holds on a deraisa level. It's not necessarily only on a derabanan level. Whereas Rabbi holds even on deraisa level. Why? Because we say Hayil.